Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: the owner of a U.S. defense contractor reportedly holding senior posts in multiple Chinese intelligence bodies. A report from the Daily Caller exposed ties in a recent investigation. We tapped the author of the report for details. Eyewitness reports say the Influenza A virus is surging inside China and people are dying. But China's CDC is staying quiet. We take a closer look. Chinese leader Xi Jinping holds a rare meeting with leading tech CEOs 4 years after launching a sweeping clampdown on the tech sector. What's behind his move? Before we dive into today's top story, we'd like to share an important update. You can now catch China in Focus on Beijing World every Tuesday instead of YouTube. We'll publish the link in the description box down below at the time, or you can search China in Focus at beijingworld.com. The owner of a U.S. defense contractor reportedly holding senior posts in multiple Chinese intelligence and propaganda bodies. The Daily Caller News Foundation first reported on the ties in a recent investigation. To understand what these findings mean for critical supply chains in the U.S., we tapped the report's author, Philip Lenzicki, and retired CIA senior intelligence officer, Nicholas Eftimiadis, for more.
The defense firm under the spotlight is called S&L Aerospace Metals. The New York-based company makes aircraft parts. Its clients range from the Pentagon to aerospace giants Lockheed Martin and Boeing. According to a U.S. government website, the company is also part of a Council for Critical Manufacturing Security under the Homeland Security Department. Here's the catch. S&L Aerospace is under the supervision of Chinese businessman Jerry Wang, also known as Wang Zhu. The owner and CEO has extensive ties to organizations known for pushing overseas influence and espionage for the Chinese Communist Party. According to reports on Chinese regime-owned websites, Wang's success is closely linked to certain U.S.-based nonprofits controlled by the CCP. After immigrating to the U.S., Wang worked in a Chinese restaurant and later in the clothing industry. Here's the twist. Wang was one of the founders of the U.S.-based Zhongzhou Chamber of Commerce and Industry. The nonprofit is under China's United Front Work Department, Beijing's overseas spy organization. After connecting with the group, Wang set his sights on the U.S. aerospace industry. He acquired S&L Aerospace from Citibank more than 20 years ago and transformed it into a defense contractor and parts supplier for the Pentagon's Black Hawk helicopters and fighter jets. But back to Wang's China ties. He's been spotted at multiple events held for senior CCP officials, including the head of the Chinese regime, Xi Jinping. A group photo from 2019 shows Wang and Linda Sun both attended a United Front Work Department event in Beijing. The Justice Department charged Sun for acting as a foreign agent for Beijing last year. S&L denies all ties between Wang and foreign political entities. Nicholas Eftimiadis, retired CIA senior intelligence officer, raised concerns.
Because he's been seen with senior Chinese leadership, and he's parts of organizations that Xi Jinping himself has defined as his magic weapon. Well, it certainly raises a question on issues of what his access has been to China. Has he been acting on China's behalf? That's certainly a question that, at least inside the counterintelligence mindset, is ongoing.
The Pentagon and other military contractors have paid S&L approximately $60 million through defense contracts. Given that access, what information could Wang hand over to the Chinese regime? Philip Lenzicki, senior investigative reporter and the report's author, weighed in.
First is that, hypothetically, such an individual would be able to share information about the blueprints, the schematics of products that they were producing. Secondly, that they would understand the supply chain involved, and somehow that would expose a vulnerability. And thirdly, in addition to their role as producing parts for other defense contractors and the Department of Defense,
FTMontis added that beyond technology, the information could involve people.
What he would have exposure to is being able to identify people in different positions, identify people who have access to that type of knowledge, help in the targeting of those individuals, either through direct approach or through cyber, identify the processes and procedures that the Department of Defense is using and the Department of Homeland Security is using or trying to promulgate for the protection of U.S. industry and critical infrastructure. So access to a lot, actually.
As for the Pentagon's vetting process for contractors,
the issue at present is that the Department of Defense does not require defense contractors to undergo what we would imagine would be an extensive background check. Rather, there is in place some type of honor system in which the defense contractors will self-disclose their own vulnerabilities to the Pentagon.
We do know that traditionally the Defense Department is really, really poor on screening its second and third tier suppliers, very poor. And we know that Homeland Security is even worse. I mean, it is just terrible.
Congressman John Molnar called the SNL discovery shocking and said it's likely just the tip of the iceberg. He's now calling to urgently address these vulnerabilities to safeguard our national security.
2 Chinese companies are in the hot seat, facing charges for intellectual property theft. They're accused of stealing trade secrets from Philips Medical Systems. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Illinois announced the case on Thursday. Qi Jinping, one of the 6 defendants, was an engineer at Philips for over a decade before joining China-based Kunshan Guoli Electronic Technology. He has been accused of passing on trade secrets to the firm back in 2018. Jan and 2 others are accused of stealing technology related to X-ray tube products, which are used by medical institutions around the globe. All 3 engineers pleaded not guilty. Now turning our attention to public health in China, reports from residents are detailing numerous deaths caused by the Influenza A virus. On the other hand, China's CDC has yet to release any information on the situation, instead claiming the country is seeing fewer cases of the virus. Many Chinese internet users are voicing doubts about these official reports. Now they're calling on Beijing to release the real data. A quick catch-up on bird flu. The virus is a type of Influenza A. It's currently spreading through poultry populations in China, the U.S., Japan, and other countries. Countries in the West say the risk of human infection is low as long as people avoid contact with infected birds, though the virus does present relatively severe symptoms in humans. Here's where the situation gets murky. Inside China, residents across the country told us that local hospitals are not testing for bird flu when patients show flu symptoms, meaning no one knows if or how many people in China may be infected or have died. NTD's Flora Hua has more on the story.
A resident from China's southern province of Sichuan posted a video on China's TikTok saying that her colleague passed away last month after getting infected with the influenza virus, aged only around 30 years old. Over 35,000 people reposted this video, with many commenting about similar death cases they'd seen in their own communities. Dozens of comments mentioned that middle-aged people had died from the virus. There are many posts like this on Chinese social media. However, it seems such information is not announced by official health institutes or covered by the media in China. In its most recent report focused on the influenza virus, the Chinese CDC claimed that both northern and southern China saw fewer positive cases, with only 1 regional outbreak reported. Such reports are in stark contrast to what many Chinese citizens are saying. Outside of mainland China, Hong Kong authorities reported 137 deaths from the influenza virus from January to February. Macau's official report says that 2 such deaths occurred within a single day, one of them victims being just 35 years old. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Bird flu can cause symptoms similar to severe human flu, such as fever, cough, pneumonia, and inflammation of the brain. One subtype of bird flu is caused by the H5 which is spreading worldwide in birds and sometimes cows. H5 bird flu has caused human infections, though rarely, and can be fatal. Chinese leader Xi Jinping holding a rare meeting with leading tech CEOs Monday. Xi urged them to show their talents and follow Beijing's policies in order to overcome difficulties. Xi did not specify what difficulties he was referring to. The meeting comes as the Chinese economy struggles with an extended slowdown and trade tensions are brewing with the U.S. President Trump has already added a 10% tariff on Chinese imports and has hinted there could be more to come. Washington has also restricted more semiconductor exports to China. Xi's meeting marks a rare turnaround in Beijing's handling of its tech industry. Just 4 years ago, the Chinese regime clamped down on its tech sector, piling on regulations and wiping away as much as trillions of dollars in stock value. One notable example, the regime halted the stock market debut of Chinese tech giant Ant Group in 2020. That's after its co-founder Jack Ma criticized Chinese authorities in a public speech. Ma has kept a low profile since, rarely appearing in public, though he was spotted at the meeting with Xi Jinping. Also present, the founders of tech giant Huawei, electric car maker BYD, and CATL or CATL, one of the world's largest electric battery suppliers. Christopher Better is a China analyst based in Hong Kong. He said the Chinese leader's move signals that Beijing needs private sector firms for its tech rivalry with the U.S., adding authorities have no choice but to support them if Beijing wants to compete with the U.S. The private sector contributes over half of China's tax revenue and 70% of tech innovation. Something to note, all Chinese companies, including the private sector, are still largely under the Chinese regime's control. Some of them also contribute to Chinese military development. State Secretary Marco Rubio is on his first Middle East tour, with a focus on discussing a ceasefire and peace in the region. NTD's Brandon Fallon spoke with David Wormser, analyst for Middle East Affairs with the Center for Security Policy, for his take on Washington's stance and how the Chinese Communist Party comes into play.
Rubio is a well-known China hawk. He visited South America and now the Middle East, both areas where the Chinese regime has been building up its presence. And it's well known that they support Iran. Is he using these visits to send a message to the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, yes, I think this is an excellent question. You had the president, too, talk about this Middle East transportation corridor that goes from the UAE across the Arabian Peninsula to Israel using Israeli ports, Indian, Greece, Israel as this corridor that also hooks up with Japan. This is really a response to China. What you're really seeing is the United States establishing the principle that slowly America will reassert its predominance in the region and China's influence will decline. Now, to do that, we don't want to send a bunch of troops. So we need strong allies. So that gets to the other pillar of our policy, which is we need strong allies who will carry the water. And in this case, Israel is both loyal and the most strong power in the region. So we're fortunate to have really the strongest regional power be our closest ally. So this is how it all comes together. And Rubio is there really to start fleshing that out.
Coming up, the State Department has removed the line saying the U.S. does not support Taiwanese independence, what it means for U.S.-Taiwan relations, and the U.S. handling of the Indo-Pacific. American and Canadian Navy ships sail between Taiwan and China as the fight over the narrow body of water that separates them escalates. And next we'll hear from Jeff Ferry, Chief Economist Emeritus at the Coalition for a Prosperous America. He shares his take on the impact of Trump's reciprocal tariffs across the globe.
Of course, we already have double-digit tariffs, generally speaking, with China, but on half their imports. So we would put more on the other half of their imports.
After the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now we pivot to Washington's relationship with a key strategic partner, Taiwan. The State Department has removed a statement on its website saying it does not support Taiwan independence. This removal does not mean that Washington now formally supports Taiwanese independence, but the Chinese Foreign Ministry was quick to lash out at Washington Monday, calling the decision a, quote, serious regression. Here's more.
Taiwan is a self-governed island and has its own military and Congress, but Communist China sees the island as a breakaway territory despite never having ruled it. Following the State Department's move, Taiwan's defense ministry said it had detected dozens of Chinese warplanes plus 9 warships near the island. Now, back to the State Department's fact sheet on Taiwan. Except for cutting the line "We do not support Taiwan independence" out, the department has also added a tech and semiconductor collaboration project between Taiwan and the Pentagon to the website. Also, the State Department said the U.S. will support Taiwan's membership in international bodies, quote, where applicable. Kent Kendall, founder of financial consultancy Blue Ocean Advisors, weighs in.
The State Department has been used to facilitate diplomacy. And under a Trump administration, like many other agencies, there to facilitate a deal. And so it's really about deal making and positioning for a deal. China has fewer options in how it reacts to things. I think they're going to be very careful.
Zooming out, foreign secretaries of the U.S., Japan, and South Korea met in Munich over the weekend, where they reiterated their commitment to upholding peace and security in the Indo-Pacific. They also announced their support of Taiwan's participation in certain international organizations. It's worth noting that the State Department under former President Biden also removed a reference to Taiwan's independence back in 2022, but added it back a month later following protests from Beijing.
Sparks are flying between Taiwan and the Chinese regime after a Canadian warship sailed through the narrow body of water separating the island from China. Taiwan's defense ministry reiterated Monday that the Taiwan Strait does not belong to China. Taiwan, along with Canada, the U.S., the U.K., and others, consider the strait an international waterway. China claims it as its own. Taiwanese officials said China's attempts to create tension threaten global security. Last week, U.S. Navy ships sailed through the strait for the first time since Donald Trump began his second term. Taiwan said China responded to the voyage with its own so-called joint combat readiness patrols. The ripple effect of President Trump's tariffs are being felt across the globe. Peter Navarro, White House senior counselor for trade and manufacturing, said the U.S. will customize tariffs for countries the U.S. has a trade deficit with, starting with those that have the highest deficits. NTD's Melina Weisskopf spoke with Jeff Ferry, chief economist emeritus at the Coalition for a Prosperous America, to discuss this approach and dive into how the tariffs could impact inflation here in America.
Now, Jeff, what do you think are the ripple effects from this, especially starting with those countries like Peter Navarro just mentioned, the countries that we have the highest deficit with?
Well, the highest deficit countries would be China, Mexico, and the European Union. And I think what Peter Navarro is suggesting is that we would reciprocate with pretty stiff tariffs, double-digit tariffs, against those 3 countries as a starting place. Of course, we already have double-digit tariffs, generally speaking, with China, but on half their imports. So we would put more on the other half of their imports. And, I think you'd see reorienting of U.S. trade. We would get less imports coming in from China, Mexico, and the European Union. We would see some stimulus of domestic production. In other words, more production, more revenue, and more jobs here in the U.S. as a result of large tariffs on those 3 trading blocks. I would expect domestic manufacturing to ramp up output. And I'm thinking of sectors like automobiles, machinery, electronics, important sectors that employ together, those sectors employ several million people in manufacturing. So we would see significant upticks in the output and the jobs in those sectors.
Jeff, why do you think we got ourselves in this situation in the first place? Why do we have trade imbalances?
Right. Well, we have trade imbalances for a number of reasons. I guess the first place we could start is an unfair landscape. That's what Peter Navarro's talking about when he says the other nations stick it to us. What we've seen over the last 30 years is a pattern where they manipulate or manage their currencies to keep their currencies too low, which benefits their exports into the U.S. market here, Also, other tactics, tariffs are one, but tariffs are so explicit that countries tend to avoid them and use non-tariff barriers, regulatory controls and things like that to keep U.S. exports out, whereas the U.S. is sort of naive and very legalistic, and we try to maintain an open opportunity for foreign countries to come in. So there's a lot of tactics that have gone on over the last 30 years, and on top of that, the U.S. is a high-wage country, and we want to keep it that way. And so countries like Vietnam, who've accelerated their imports into the U.S. market, have taken advantage of their low wages, investment from China, and investment from U.S. multinationals to send goods into this country. And so Vietnam's another one I would put pretty high on the list of countries that we've got to take a hard look at the imports we get from Vietnam and do something to control it.
Together, I want to listen to what Trump said about this when he announced these tariffs. Listen in.
This is going to be what pays down to $36 trillion in debt and all the other things. And this is going to be, this is an amazing day. I think this is going to be a very big day and in a very positive way for our country.
Jeff, your thoughts on what he said, and also just the bigger question here, how long would it take for these tariffs to actually make a dent in the national debt?
Yeah, that's a good question. The timing of all this is yet to be seen, right? I mean, the national debt of $36 trillion is very substantial, of course, and it's over 100% of our GDP, and it rises each year that we run a budget deficit. So I think what President Trump's referring to is the stimulative effect of broad-based tariffs on the U.S. economy is going to increase production, increase revenue, increase employment, which then increases the tax revenue we get from all these people and companies who are working in the U.S. And it's that tax revenue combined with reducing federal spending that helps us start paying back and reducing the federal debt of $36 trillion, as he said.
Now, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston recently released a study suggesting that Trump's tariff proposals would have a minimal inflationary impact. Why do you think that could be?
Yeah, I mean, inflation is really a red herring in all of this. We saw Trump impose some stiff tariffs in 2018 and 2019. Consumer price inflation actually declined. It didn't rise. So now we're talking about broader tariffs, to some extent higher tariffs, although similar sorts of rates I would expect. 25% I think could be a tariff rate we will see. And frankly, it's on only a sector of the economy. Imports are about just under 15% of our gross domestic product. So you tariff that sector, you don't get much of an inflationary impact. A lot of it gets buried in between the exporter and the importer. The currency effect reduces the impact here. There are a lot of, slips between glass and lip, as the old saying has it. So I'm really not very worried about inflation.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff Ferry, Chief Economist. We appreciate having you on the show today. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.